Garden at the manor house. A flight of grey stone steps leads up to the house. The garden, an old-fashioned one, full of roses. Basket chairs and a table covered with books are set under a large yew tree.
Cecily! Cecily! Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours. Especially when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know perfectly well that your guardian wishes you to improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German when he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he's leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended in one as young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would. You know, geology and German and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would wish to retrieve him. I am not in favour of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap. But you must put away your diary, dear Cecily. I do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened, and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are! I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. But to your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Ah, Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning, Miss Prism? I trust you are well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, that you are not inattentive.
Oh, I am afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I speak metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I presume, has not yet returned from his trip to town?
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical illusion merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you, no doubt, both at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might even go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, will review your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee, you may admit, it is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side. Shall we?
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing? Uncle Jack's brother? Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you, Miss Prism, were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. I suppose you had better talk to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I am sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You must not think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Well, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
Indeed, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small ways.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much more pleasant being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
That is a great tragedy. I'm obliged to go back up to London by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement when one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you had better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He has gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He's got no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts that I receive from Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is quite good enough for me.
But are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid not so. That is why I want you to reform me. You may make that your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first?
A
I
Maréchal...
never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
Excuse me, a Maréchal Niel?
No, I'd much sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They're a snare that every sensible man would like to get caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope? Never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously why the primitive church has not lasted up until the present day. And you do not seem to understand, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally as attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And even then, I'm told, not even to her.
That depends entirely on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where's Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Earnest? Dead?
Quite dead.
Ha! What a lesson for him! I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, you have my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is still such a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you at least with him at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris in fact. I got the telegram from the Grand Hotel last night.
And was a cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to draughts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any serious state of mind at the last. You will no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affair on Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the manna in the wilderness can be adapted for almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings and confirmations, on days of humiliation and festal days. In fact, the last time I delivered it was in the cathedral, as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent amongst the Upper Orders. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, you mentioned christenings, Doctor. You know how to christen all right. I mean, you are continually christening, are you not?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any infant in whom you are particularly interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
Those who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I am very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself, if you have nothing better this afternoon.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it.
But do you have any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehension. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what time would you like the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 if that suits you.
Perfectly, perfectly. It just so happens that I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform around the same time. A case of twins in one of the outlying cottages on your estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened alongside babies. It would seem so childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude into a house of sorrow any further. I would merely beg you to be not too bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of a most obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you have got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you had toothache, and I have got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
Oh, these are very joyful tidings.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think it is perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I'm very sorry about all the trouble that I've given you, and that I intend to live a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid, and who leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking to you about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he has told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury, and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It isn't enough to drive anyone perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I've expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering that this is my first time being here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation. I think we might leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algy, you must get out of here at once. I don't allow any Bunburying here.
I have put Mr. Ernest's thing in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that's all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay for more than a week this time.
Mr. Merriman, please order the dog cart. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't been called up to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth would you go up and change? It is perfectly childish, being in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you in your house for a whole week. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you while you're in mourning. I think it would be most unkind. You wouldn't leave me if I were in mourning, I suppose. I should think that most unfriendly.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I've never seen anyone take so long to dress and with such little result.
Well, at any rate, it is better than you being always overdressed for everything.
If I'm occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous, your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you've got to catch the 4-5, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey back to town. Your bun-bearing, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a rather great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that's all. But I must speak to her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid it is so. It is a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merryman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be, in every way, the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Earnest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to have a look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you loved me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad. You, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me. But I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, but when was our engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day I went out and bought this little ring in your name. And this is the little bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It is very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
Oh, you need hardly remind me of that. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do you let me read them?
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I had broken off the engagement are so beautiful, and so badly spelled, that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was, on the 22nd of March. Here you can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Earnest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I haven't done anything at all. I must say, Cecily, I'm very much hurt indeed to hear that you had broke it off. Particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
My dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally, does it?
Yes, darling. With a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
You will never break off our engagement again, will you?
I don't think I could break it off now that I have actually met you. Besides, of course, there's the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. There's something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But my dear child, do you mean to say that you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
But my own sweet dear little Cecily, I don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not a bad name at all. Indeed, it is rather an aristocratic name. More than half of the chaps that go into bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, if my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Earnest. I might admire your character. But I fear I could not give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must speak to him at once at a most important christening. A most important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th, and that I only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
A Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are associated and interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we're going to be great friends. I already like you more than I can say.
How nice of you to like me so much after we have known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. Once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. I'm not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm quite fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I'm bound to state that now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly.
Pray, do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candour, I wish, Cecily, that you were fully 42, and more than usually plain for your age. Earnest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest, most possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influences of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Earnest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. You have lifted a load from my mind, Cecily. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud would have come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who's your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolen, there's no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. A little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Earnest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, there must be some slight error. Mr. Earnest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am very glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it.
I had no idea that there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
This is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering from it very much just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I have been told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I most distinctly asked you for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood.
Earnest! My own Earnest?
Gwendolen, darling.
A moment. May I ask you if you're engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily. Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack!
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens! Gwendolen?
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen. I mean, to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh. Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practised on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet, wronged Gwendolen.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there's just one question I'd like to be permitted to put to you. Where's your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Earnest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've been reduced to such a situation, and I'm really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly, I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother, and I certainly do not intend, at any point in the future, to ever have a brother.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Never, not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bun-burying, I suppose.
Yes, and what a perfectly wonderful bunbury it is. The most wonderful bunbury I've ever had.
Well, you've no right whatsoever to bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious bunburyist knows that.
Serious bunburyist, good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about bunburying. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in this whole wretched affair is that your friend Bunbury has quite exploded, hasn't he? You won't be able to trot off to the country quite so often as you were used to, dear Algy. And quite a good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, my dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear up to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
And as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I must say you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
Well, I can see no possible defence for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax. To say nothing of the fact that she's my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen.
Well,
that is all.
well-
I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there's certainly no chance of you marrying Miss Cardew.
Well, I don't think there is much likelihood of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Well, that's no business of yours.
If it was my business, I certainly wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's own business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
How can you sit there calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble I can't make out? You seem to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I cannot eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless. You're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, whenever I'm in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will be able to tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would have tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens! I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you to eat muffins. That is an entirely different manner.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. That is absurd. I never go without my dinner. Nobody ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 6:15 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. That's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened. And I should think it quite probable that I never was. And Dr. Chasuble agrees with me. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know that my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected to you was nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said a severe chill wasn't hereditary.
It usedn't be, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
Oh, that is nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you're at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why won't you go?
But I haven't quite finished my tea yet. Besides, there is still 1 muffin left.
Morning room at the manor house.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That seems like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly, it's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask of you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
That seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't, but that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer me for pretending to have a brother? Was it so that you had an opportunity of coming up to town as often as possible to see me?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not a moment for German scepticism. The explanations seem quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then should we forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Couldn't we both speak at the same time?
An admirable idea. I almost always speak at the same time as others. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you're prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk about the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are indefinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell!
Good heavens!
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprised? sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course you must clearly understand that all communications between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury's somewhere else at present. Indeed, Bunbury's dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His
Oh.
death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I've killed him this afternoon. I mean, he died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? He was quite exploded.
Exploded? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he was well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, Bunbury was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury couldn't live. That's what I mean. So Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I am glad, however, that he finally made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we've gotten rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who's that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecilia Cardew.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there's anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that do go on seem to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW, Gervasey Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses have always inspired confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They are open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messer, Marksby, and Marksby.
Marksby, and Marksby, a firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Marksbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and English varieties.
A life crowded with incident, I see, though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I myself am not in favour of premature experiences. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell, so pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady, now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any real solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come over here, dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvellous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to the young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The two weak points of our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They are worn very high, just at present. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl I ever met. And I don't care two pens about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only those who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I'm not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's characters before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cadou's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak to you frankly about your nephew, but the fact is that I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He's an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London, on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Jouet, Brut 89, wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of an afternoon in alienating the affection of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is he knew from the start that I do not have a brother, that I have never had a brother, and that I have no plans to have a brother in the future. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I've decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You're perfectly all right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me again, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you, but I think it is only fair to tell you that, according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cadou does not come of age legally until the age of 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even still more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is now. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algy, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others, and waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she's 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I must beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will happily allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear. We've already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christenings? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both of these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excess. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand then that there are to be no christenings this afternoon?
I don't think that as the things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. But seeing as your mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I shall retire to the church. Indeed, I have been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I am on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance for both Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. What position does she hold in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism? Come here, Prism. Prism, where's that baby? 28 years ago, Miss Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, after the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usual revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where's that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that will forever be branded in my memory, I prepared to take the baby out, as usual, in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag, in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained the infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton Line!
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait for me here.
If you're not along, I'll wait here for you all my life.
do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if he was having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish he would arrive to some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this your handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here's the injury it received to the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Here's the stain on the lining, caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here, on the lock, are my initials. I forgot that in a rather extravagant mood I had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm delighted to have it so unexpectedly returned to me. It has been quite inconvenient being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother!
Mr. Worthing! I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny that is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady that can show you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell? I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
The news I will have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have doubted that I had a brother? Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. You young scoundrel, Algy, you will have to treat me better in the future. You have not behaved like a brother to me a day in your life.
Well, not up until now, old boy, I admit. I did my best, however, till I was out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens, I had forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. A moment, Aunt Augusta. At the moment when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. Now what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the moment recall what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in the later years. And that was a result of the Indian climate and marriage, and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I've no doubt his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. M. Generals. Malum, Maxbohm, Magley? What ghastly names they have. Marksby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief, Lieutenant 1840, Captain Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel General 1869. Christian names. Earnest, John. I always told you, Gwendolen, my name was Earnest, didn't I? Well, it is Earnest after all. Naturally, it is Earnest.
Yes, I remember now that the general's name was Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest. My own Earnest! I felt it from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolen, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia.
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolen, at last.
My nephew, you seem to me to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now just realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.
Thank you all for listening to the English Drama Group Salzburg performing Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest live on Radio Fabrik. The cast:
Algernon Moncrief, voiced by Pascal Mautner.
Lane, voiced by Eva Nedved.
Jack Worthing, voiced by Benjamin Shear.
Lady Bracknell, voiced by Anna Odrich.
Gwendolyn Fairfax, voiced by Irina Schweiger.
Miss Prism, voiced by AJ Klein.
Cecily Cardew, voiced by Nadine Tanasse.
Reverend Canon Chasuble, voiced by Matthew Rushmere.
Merriman, voiced by Eva Nedved.
Narrator, voiced by Tobias Acksteiner. Crew: Director and Producer Konstantin Beck. Assistant Director and Sound Effects Anne Udrich. Music Sabine Rechberger. Marketing and PR Pascal Mautner and Anne Udrich. Leader of the EDGS Michael Darmanin. With special thanks to Radio Fabrik, we all wish you a pleasant evening. Thank you and goodbye.
Als nächstes spielt Jeremy Denk Präludien von Debussy.